Yeah.
Technical difficulties. No worries. So we're talking about being powered by bodhicitta. Powered by bodhicitta. And if you can be powered by bodhicitta and simultaneously aware that you have a physical body, right? And the way you view your physical body is, I need to take care of it so that I can help others. I need to take care of it so that I can increase my path. And it is actually self-cherishing to neglect this body because you're saying it only hurts me. It only hurts me to not sleep enough. It only hurts me to not drink enough water. It only hurts me to eat junk food. Who does it hurt? It's nobody's business what I do with my body and my time. That is a form of self-cherishing. Can you feel it? And how bodhicitta is really saying, no, actually, this is an important vessel here. This vehicle is going to help me be of benefit to others. So my attachment might want to stay up too late, reading the next chapter, watching the next episode. But my bodhicitta says, you have to go to bed now so that you're strong for yourself and others tomorrow. So a lot of this is about, like, for lack of a better word, delayed gratification, but it's a lot more about having the long view and changing your relationship to small discomfort. It's not about pretending there isn't pain or fatigue in a real way. It's about changing your relationship to minor inconvenience and small discomforts that we normally buffer with little strategies of attachment. So really examining what are those little strategies of attachment and avoidance that we do, and how do we ignore the call when people actually do need us? Sometimes they don't ask it in obvious ways, but there's an obvious opening there to support. You know, if it's a pet, it's obvious. They just whine at you or stare at you or scratch at the door, right? And they're like, I would like a cuddle immediately, now, right? I would like the food now. But humans, we're complicated little creatures. So just kind of like leaning into a habit of listening deeply for what people are saying and asking of you. It's a sort of type of strength that you need to develop. And what happens, of course, is when you have a day where you've really thought of others without martyrdom, and you've ate properly and you've slept enough, you are happy. Yeah. If you spend the day obsessing about what shall I eat? How will I sleep? And you get really kind of like uptight about it, it becomes its own issue, right? And some people get very uptight about their diet and they get really weird about it. And it has to be at this time, it has to be these ingredients, and I have this food sensitivity and I have this allergy. And some of that is true and relevant, and some of that is being fragile and precious. And I think we all can feel the difference when someone else is doing it. Right? But can we feel the difference when it's us being a little precious, right? And that's not to say that you can't be like, please don't put shellfish in that or I'll explode, right? Like if you have an allergy, you have an allergy. But it's learning those feelings of self-cherishing so that you don't give in to them. Because self-cherishing keeps telling you a lie, which is that it will protect you, it will soothe you, it will help you. And it's the thing that keeps you feeling disconnected from other people. Yeah, it is lying. Yeah. So, you know, if you think back in your memories, how many times when you rallied for the sake of someone you loved, right? You were tired, but you gave yourself energy because somebody needed you. After whatever that chapter was, you might be physically a little tired, but mentally you're probably very happy to have helped. Yeah. Yeah, I remember sometimes this would happen at the nunnery in Chenrezig, where there'd be a huge huntsman spider. And if you've ever seen a huntsman spider, it looks like a tarantula, like they're big, but they move really fast. But they're actually not particularly poisonous, they're just scary looking. And sometimes the nuns would call me in the middle of the night and say, there's a huntsman under my bed, come and save me. And, you know, like I sort of adopted the attitude as like the spider whisperer because I had a tarantula as a child, as a pet, because I am weird. Um, so they would say, Yunten, I need help with the spider. And I would of course be like, oh, I'm in my pajamas. It's cold outside. I don't want to. but they need me. They're not gonna sleep if this spider is in their house. I'll save you, and I'd go over to their house and I'd bring my little container and I'd scoop up the spider and I'd take it out into the jungle and put it somewhere cozy and tell it some mantras and then go back to bed. And I was often really happy to have helped. And of course, my sleep got a little disrupted, but I probably went right back to sleep quite well. When someone just like has needed you, you were helpful, it was satisfying. We want to be connected to our fellow man. And then we do all these things to prevent connection to our fellow man, right? And self-cherishing is the one to say that, it'll help you to stay away from them. It'll help you to preserve and save your time. So finding the difference between boundaries and barriers, finding the difference between being powered by bodhicitta as opposed to being sort of powered by guilt or, expectation or something. We just have to really get used to what does self-cherishing feel like when it is driving the decisions, and what does it feel like when bodhicitta is driving the decisions? So this is the way that we'll avoid transgressing this vow that is really about that miserliness that hoards. It hoards time, it hoards resources, it hoards knowledge, and says, I don't want to, I can't be bothered. Doesn't want to be inconvenienced. Thoughts? Yeah, this one making sense?
May I just ask one
Yeah, please.
question?
Sure.
Yeah. Um, Hi. So, I was just wondering because you were talking about like sharing Dharma with people who are able to receive it. And it's sort of like I observed that this is actually kind of like things that I also struggle with. Like uh, when I observe someone suffering and having problem and reaching for help, sometimes to me, and I just sort of can see that there are certain roots of their suffering that I could point out, and if they were eliminated, then they could probably be happier. But there's
Yeah.
sort of like they are not able to receive that information because their sort of set of values is totally different, right? They sort of like associate happiness with maybe some kind of like materialistic
Yeah.
comforts and pleasures. And at the same time, I just feel like, okay, I need to give up. But it's also like it really saddens me that I'm not able to share it. I was just like, would you say that it's self-cherishing feeling or something, or
I mean, it
in me?
depends because sometimes it's just compassion, you want to alleviate their suffering and you don't see an opportunity to help alleviate their suffering. And that is sad, and it's just an honest assessment of people who are stuck in samsara, including ourselves, hurt ourselves needlessly. We all hurt ourselves needlessly and we hurt each other needlessly. And that is part of why we need to be disillusioned with samsaric existence and get free. And of course, in our process of getting free, we want to take as many people as possible with us. But some of these people are not ready for the hand that we're reaching out to them. And they're going to need to wait until we're actually completely Buddhas and we're omniscient enough to know here is the timing and here is the type of teaching they can hear. So when we think about compassion, it's helpful to think of the very simple definition, which is just wishing others freedom from suffering. And that means that you believe in freedom and you acknowledge suffering, right? So you have to hold both. If you're just seeing the suffering, it's a skill of empathy, which is beautiful and useful, but you will get more and more deflated and more depressed and more despairing of the world if you're only empathic to suffering without being resonant with the potential for freedom. You can kind of see any suffering that could ever be if at the same time you're holding the clear awareness that this is not their fate, this is not forever, this is not their nature. When we start getting really, really tired in the face of suffering or really sad in the face of suffering in a way that's heavy, It's like empathic distress. When we have compassion, we don't get that same fatigue. So it might be that you just need to be like, okay, in this moment, maybe even in this life, not a ton of progress will happen for them, but I can maintain my heart connection to them. And as I develop, I will get more and more skillful in offering them tools. And it is incredibly poignant when this happens, and it happens to all of us where we just see it and we want to do something and we just can't. Their worldview has gotten too concrete. But if you can think this is not forever, and the fact that we have this connection now will be very useful in the future for their progress. And it almost can motivate your own practice to have more momentum. Like, I really need to become enlightened. So I know what to say, when to say it, how to say it to people in this position. Because right now I'm just stabbing in the dark, hoping for the best with my good, kind heart, but not the skillful means that I need. So you just kind of, okay, I love you. I wish you well. Let's make sure your creature comforts like food and warmth and entertainment are taken care of. And I'm going to go back to my path now. Yeah. It's, oh, it's hard. Yeah, it's really hard. When you're with someone too, it's good to kind of read, is their current need to be mirrored, or is their current need to be inspired? Because we sometimes misread it and then we're not as useful. So sometimes people just need you to say, I see that you're suffering. That looks so hard. And you say it in words that make sense for you and make sense for your relationship. But the gist of it is, I see that you're suffering and I see that this is hard. Can I help you in some way with it? What can I do, please? Yeah. And if it's just to be here with you, I will just be here with you and love you. So sometimes they just need mirroring. And sometimes they need inspiration. And so you tell them about this is not forever. You tell them about the possibility for transformation, or you tell them stories of others who have got themselves out of difficulty. But if you do that at the wrong time, it will just piss them off, right? We've probably all done that, yeah? Where we've talked about inspiring things at a time where they just needed to be seen. Right? Or we've like told them what we see at a time they needed to be inspired, right? And we've said, "Oh, I see that you're suffering. It seems really hard." And they're like, "Yes, it is, but anyway, give me some good advice." Right? So that's half the battle, is being able to listen deeply enough in the moment to what is the actual need they're expressing right now. Is it to be seen or is it to be inspired? Do they want their suffering spotlighted or their potential for freedom spotlighted? In either case, I'm going to try to hold both of them simultaneously. And that kind of compassionate presence does so much more for people than we ever give ourselves credit for. When you're just holding the space with them, genuinely wishing them well, with a belief that wellness is possible, right? And you don't have to ever even say it necessarily. You're just holding the truth that you know. Changes so much. And it feels so respectful, I think, on the other set aside, because it's like, yes, I see your suffering, and I see you are not only your suffering. Do you know what I mean? Yeah, gently, gently.
I learned
So,
to be
oh,
flexible
sure.
because I have one part of my family who are atheistic mathematicians and the other part are artistic Christians. So that's
Ah,
like change the way because something won't work here definitely.
yep. Yeah, you got to read the room. You have to read the room. Yeah. Yep. I have a family member on the autism spectrum, and I can be much more blunt with her than with anyone else, and it works much more effectively. But then if I switch gears and I'm talking to someone who's neurotypical, they'll be like, "Oh, ouch, Yönten, that was a bit blunt." I'm like, "Oh, change gears, change gears." Different person, different needs, same baseline needs, but the way of expression has to adjust. Yeah. It's something about being just very present with what's happening. Um, the third one I'm going to talk about today, and then we're going to do a little reflection, is not forgiving others, but harboring a grudge and holding it even when they apologize. So my teacher says, let's say that someone does something inappropriate to you and they make an attempt to apologize in an appropriate or harmonious way. right? They're doing a good job with their apology, but you don't listen to what they say. You don't accept their apology because of anger. So the basis for this root downfall is a person who has done something inappropriate to you. The disturbing emotion involved in that attitude for you is anger or resentment. So due to anger or resentment, you don't listen to their apology or accept it. So you're holding a grudge, right? You're holding a grudge. So this doesn't mean someone who's giving you a crappy apology, like a "I'm sorry if you feel that way," not a crap apology, right? Someone who's giving you a real apology and you're not forgiving them. Do we do this? Do we do this in small ways? Do we do this in big ways? What is it to hold a grudge? The feeling of holding a grudge, when you see a person you're holding a grudge towards, what is that like physically and viscerally? Do you almost feel your heart shut down or a clench happen? Yeah, what happens to you when you're holding a grudge? And sometimes it's like they've done a wrong and you haven't even told them that you were hurt and you're expecting them to magically know. And that's not quite fair. Right? Or you're pretending you don't need an apology because you're a superior spiritual practitioner and you're above all of that, but really you aren't. Right? So if you feel wounded, it is your job to figure out how to heal the wound. And a component of that might involve someone's apology. Hopefully, it doesn't have to involve someone's apology because lots of times people who hurt you won't apologize. So if you're banking on that, life will be rough. But those rare times someone actually says they're sorry from the heart. From a Bodhisattva path perspective, we need to genuinely accept that. Yeah. So it might seem obvious. It might seem really like, sure, of course. But if you're looking at your past and when you just hold on to stories and you just hold on to wounds and you keep pouring salt in the wound and start identifying with the wound, this can become really problematic. You can see the great benefit in support groups for trauma survivors, and you can see the great harm in support groups for trauma survivors. The very same group could have either effect. And what can happen is, of course, the trauma survivor feels seen and heard and loved and understood with fellow sufferers, and it is such a relief. But then the problem can be that they so identify as a member of that community, they never allow the next step of healing. They stay in that first step of healing. And the next step of healing requires your own personal development and your personal accountability. And what can happen is that if you stay overly identified in that place of, I am a survivor of, after you've done your initial healing, is that it becomes problematic and your self-cherishing co-ops it. And you start to say to yourself, whether you realize it or not, I'm allowed to get away with this, this, and this behavior because I have suffered. Or if people only knew how I've suffered, they would let me off the hook for this, this, and this. And we might see it in other people that are overly identified with their pain and find it really hard to talk to them about anything because they just hold this sign, this facade of, I am the survivor of. And you can't talk to them about anything or ask them to take accountability for anything. Do you know this one? And it's not to say that if something terrible has happened, you don't deserve healing or don't deserve compassion or love. Of course you do. There's just a fundamental time where the healing can be turned into another fuel for self-cherishing. Yeah. So I mean, so take something really low stakes and not too triggering, like if you broke your arm, right? So you broke your arm and you've got a cast and there's certain things you can't do with that arm and you need some help. We're with this and this, all valid, all valid. And then the cast comes off and you keep demanding that same care. But the cast is off. And it's not to say that that arm doesn't still have a little bit of weakness and vulnerability that you, as the person who owns the arm, need to be aware of. But the need for others to accommodate it has passed. Yeah, so you still need to be a little careful with that arm because it needs to get its strength back. But other people don't need to be so careful with it now. but you're saying that they should. Yeah, maybe it's not a good example, but it's something where, yeah, the healing has happened enough, and now it is your turn to continue the healing, but you've decided to keep putting it on others. So, however you want to look at grudge things, if someone actually makes the apology, look at your own kind of anger, entitlement, pride, etc. Usually it's anger, but anger is often fed by attachment, not getting what it wants. Yeah, and to keep remembering that attachment is fed by not getting what it wants is helpful if you're trying to get rid of some anger. Yeah. How does that all sit with you? Do you have some debates or some insights?
I think the example was valid because I have cerebral palsy and I have this kind of, okay, I should be careful, I should avoid, I cannot do it. And see, generally I'm living quite normal life, but yeah, it's this feeling that because I had trouble as a small child, and now I'm entitled to something special. So yeah, I think it's kind of toxic, but it's there.
Yeah. And you yourself know when it's a valid time and when it's taking for granted the fact that it's usually you that gets, yeah, when it's taking for granted and when it's valid, you know the difference. Yeah, it's tricky.
Yeah,
Yeah.
I mean, I left this hospital many years ago, but and I'm an adult, but I still think like this
Yeah.
sometimes.
Yeah, it's human. Yeah, it's really human. Yeah, Eleanor, did you have one? Oh, unmute.
I was thinking about the apology, but from a family perspective. And I've watched several of my family. Anger is a big thing, like a terrible thing. And I watched my brother die in anger, which was terrible. And I'm just wondering, I can see that in others, and it's created a huge gap, a huge distance between family members. And on the outside, how to, and I don't know if it's appropriate at this stage to talk about it, but just how to kind of bring family members together without looking like the Pope, if you
Yeah.
know what I mean. Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah,
Yeah.
yeah.
Yeah. I mean,
Mm.
I think we probably all relate. There are some family dynamics we wish we could soothe in some way. And the first step is to realize you are the expert of your own family, and
Mm.
that the dynamics that you know and observe, you're going to be specialized to understand what will work and what won't. And still, you're making an educated guess. But any advice that someone else could give you isn't going to land perfectly just because the situations are so unique and people's communication styles are so unique. So, with that kind of disclaimer, then to think, all right, well, if there is an ongoing family drama and it's already bad, would it make it worse to just kind of lance the boil and name it? In some cultures, not. In some family cultures, yes. You know, you're the one that knows. Will this make it worse or not? To just name, you guys, for decades, this has been what's happening. Can we all agree this is what's been happening? We don't have to say who's right and who's wrong or what to do about it yet, but can we just name that it's been tense at every family dinner for the last 25 years? Can we just say it? And then can we have a gentle conversation about it? Is there a way that we can do that? Are there different combinations of family members where it would be better to talk first before we all come together? But do we really want to live this way? Death is coming for us all. So it's just really asking yourself, would it make it worse to just kind of be bold and name it? And only you really
Mm.
know. And still, you won't know 100%, but you can kind of feel your way into it. And sometimes you
Mm.
do make it worse in a way that is fundamentally better, where there's just been this toxic tension and what you say separates people, but actually everyone feels a lot better having finally gotten separated. it's tricky. I mean, some of you know this story, but like I confronted a family member who seemed to be abusing a young child in my family. I confronted him and told members of the family who could protect her, and it all blew up. And half the family believed me, and half the family didn't. And then those two halves have not talked to each other for 20 years, right? So, like, I get it, right? Families are complicated, and at the end of the day, I protected the child from further harm. So if it got messy
Mm.
for the grown-ups, oh well, I'll take that bullet. It's like I protected the child from that type of harm. We all know the damage that type of harm does. But I mean, I wish there was
Mm.
another way it could have happened. I wish there was a more harmonious way. I wish there's a way it could all come back together. And I know my family, and poking at it will make it worse. You know, it will. I know them. But that's not true for everybody in all circumstances. And maybe it won't feel true in 3 or 5 more years when everyone's just that much older and closer to death. Maybe it'll feel different in 5 years. So these are delicate things, but sit with what might happen if, and just kind of explore different avenues in your mind and kind of picture how everyone's reactions might be given how you know them. And then sometimes you do take a risk, but just kind of be ready for the fallout of that risk and don't get too rose-colored glasses about it. Because you're someone who's lived an introspective, examined life for decades and decades, and the way you think about the world is fundamentally different than someone who has not lived an examined life, who has contemplated these things for decades. So, sometimes we don't give people credit, and they have done the deep work, but you know your family, right? And
Mm.
there might be a couple hard nuggets there who have just blamed the outside world for everything always and never even considered the role they play in their own suffering. Yeah, and that guy
Mm.
might actually be a Buddha, who knows? A plant from the Dharmakaya
Mm.
mind of all the Buddhas to get people to think deeply, or they might just be a suffering sentient being, we don't know. But
And
yeah,
I
just sit
often
with
think about that. Think
yeah,
about maybe that lesson that's being learned. Yeah, taking, what am I learning from this? Yeah.
yeah,
Mm.
yeah, it's not simple answers. But yeah,
Thank you.
yeah, thank you. So these last ones, they all kind of boil down to the issue of we're trying to navigate anger, attachment, and ignorance, right? Remember in the wheel of life, the 3 poisons drive the whole mess. All of the mess of all of our life and lifetimes is driven by this core, like battery of samsara, which is anger, attachment, and ignorance. And then it elaborates, right? You have attachment, hatred, or anger, ignorance, and then everything else spills out from it, right? Spilling out from ignorance. We have all sorts of kinds of ignorance. Spilling out from attachment, all sorts of attachments. From hatred or anger, all sorts. So, what we're trying to do with these Bodhisattva vows is get a handle on them so that the wheel starts to break, and that we do this for the sake of all sentient beings. So, what I want us to do now is just for a couple of minutes, just a couple short minutes to just sit with imagining the 3 poisons biting each other's tails the way the snake and the bird and the pig bite each other's tails and reinforce each other. So just pick one. Pick either ignorance or attachment or anger, and then think about for you how it leads to the others and how they reinforce each other. Okay, so just sit for a second and pick one: anger or attachment or ignorance. And kind of how it operates in your daily life. And then how does the other two reinforce or flow on from it? And just use this as an exercise of self-awareness. Because if you can see your own patterns, that is half the battle. Maybe even 3/4 of the battle to interrupting these cycles. Okay. So you can relax your attention and just through the week, have a little think about how those three relate to one another. You know, so we're usually a little bit dominant in one of them, and then the other two flow from it when we're tired or stressed or whatever. So just kind of play with, what is my relationship to anger, attachment, ignorance? And, and then we'll kind of circle back to how the Bodhisattva vows can address those, prevent those, help us purify the tendencies of those, etc. So just kind of sit with those three. And it doesn't have to be at all a sitting practice. It's like a walking around in your daily life practice. Just noticing, oh, I've been irritated all day, and now my way of soothing my irritation is attachment. Oh, and now having soothed my attachment, I vague out into some spacey, ignorant space thing. And because I've been so unmindful, now I have this slow creeping irritability, and the cycle continues, or whatever, right? So you just kind of like, whatever one is up for you, just kind of take a minute, while you're waiting for the kettle to boil, and be like, what is the dominant affliction right now? Right? And if you catch it, you can usually interrupt it. Yeah. But you can also track back, how did I get here? How did I get here? Okay, so we'll go ahead and dedicate. Janchu Sencho Rinpoche, Ma Ke Panam Ke Gyuchi, Ke Panyam Pame Payang, Gone Gondu Pelwa Sho, Toni Dawa Rinpoche, Ma Ke Panam Ke Gyuchi, Ke Panyam Pame Payang, Gone Gondu Pelwa Sho. Okay, see you next week.
Thank you, and thank you so much for bringing us just
Yeah.
one step closer to understanding